Hello everyone, welcome back. I have here the Primary Arms M8 Raptor. Okay, this is a LPVO 1 to 8 power. This is a $1,500 scope. So this is pricey, and I'm not in the habit of spending that amount of money for a scope. The reason why I bought it is because every scope that I had prior to this was just coming up short in one way or another. Okay, so the thing is that really make this scope. There's two things that make this scope really stand out. One, it's got auto shut off and shake awake on the reticle. That's a really big thing, because one of the problems I've had with my prior LPVOs is I would always forget the battery on, and I would always come back to a dead battery. It got a little annoying after a while, so I just stopped turning it on. So I would just work with the Etched Reticle, in which case it was kind of pointless having an Illuminated Reticle. With this one having the auto off, auto on, I can now just keep it on, and not worry about running down the battery so that often. Okay. The other thing that makes this scope really stand out is the reticle. So here's the thing, it is a first focal plane scope. Okay, so when you're in 1 power versus when you're in 8 power, you're going to see different things. Okay, so if you're in 1 power, right, what you're going to see is basically, well, right here, this over here, which is basically a duplex reticle. Okay, and there'll be a dot. The horseshoe will be in the center. If you illuminate it, that'll look like a dot. And here's the thing, dots aren't enough. Like even on red dots, if all you have is a red dot, it can be very hard to find it. Usually with a red dot, you need a 65 MOA circle around it in order to be able to, to guide you to the center where the dot is. So the way this accomplishes it is with these posts here on the sides, which is basically a duplex reticle. Okay, which they kind of copied over from the German 4 reticle. So it's a design that's been around for a very long time, very successful. So these posts here are going to guide you to the center where your reticle is. Okay, so on the one hand you've got the post. On the other hand, you've got a reticle that you can reliably use because of the auto on, or auto off, auto on. Where you know that it's going to be working and you're not just going to have a dead battery. Okay, so in 1 power, this is really useful. And then if you zoom in, okay, you basically, when you zoom in towards the center, this starts to become readable, right? Because you can't, it's still there, but it's just too small to see it here. And obviously you don't need it when you're in 1 power. Well, if you're shooting at distance and you zoom in, you start seeing the details of the reticle, which has lots of great things that we're going to talk about in a second. So first, let me show you guys through the glass what that looks like, because one thing to see it on the back of the box, another thing to kind of see it yourselves. Let's see how, do the best that we can to try and get you guys to see it through the camera. So this is with the illumination off, right? So you see how the posts kind of guide you to the center. Let's see if I can get them in focus. There you go. Oh, hell, almost there. Oh, wow. Okay, here we go. Try not to lose it. Okay, so you see how those posts will kind of guide you to the center. Let me turn on the... Okay, I just turned on the reticle. There we go. So I think that's an 8 power there. See if I can dial all the way up to 10. So it doesn't... There we go. Okay. So the dot itself isn't enough. You really need those posts on the outside to drive you to the center. Ideally, in some later version, those posts would light up as well. I understand that's going to require lots of energy, right? So the only way I think that they could accomplish that is with a solar panel or with some type of tritium. It's going to be hard to eliminate the posts themselves, just off of a battery and not kill the battery pretty quickly. But that's the only thing I can think of that would make this better. Okay, and let me show you guys. If I zoom, let me zoom you guys to 8 power. Let's see if I can get you guys to see There we go. I think I almost had it. I'm trying to orient this through the camera lens, which often doesn't turn out really. Come on, where are you? Here it is. Let me zoom this out just a little bit. Let's go to 3 power. So one of the great things about this that they sort of really well is these, I got a print out here so it's a little easier for you guys to see. So as you zoom in, right, let's say you're at 3 power, these lines over here get gradually thinner, okay? So even at 3 power, you're going to see a different image than if you're at 8 power versus if you're at 1 power, okay? And the other great thing that they have here is they did put a barbell, these barbells over here, which is the halfway point, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the reticle. Let me show you a better, there you go. So as far as range estimation, right, these are, you got your mil dots here, right? You got 100 going all the way up, 100 going down. So you have a total of 200 vertical and 200 horizontal. Okay, so that gives you a major advantage, especially in my situation, because look where I'm at. I'm in the woods. Okay, the most common thing that I see is trees. Okay, and I know that my tree lines, right? My tree line, as I have measured it, is about 90 feet tall. Okay, the trees aren't actually that tall, right? The trees are usually about 65, 70 feet, but then the ground is somewhat uneven. So I've determined through observation and measuring that my average tree line is about 90 feet. So if you think about it, if you're either hunting or even if you're like in a combat type of situation, a lot of times you're looking across a field, right? And at the back of the field, you have your tree line. And the things that you want to shoot are usually coming out of the tree line. So it's really helpful to know what the distance is to the tree line where the things that you'll be shooting at are going to be coming out of. Okay, so that's not something that you can do with a reticle that only has, let's say, 10 or 20 mils. You need a reticle that basically has a total of 200. And here, just basically at 100 yards, my tree line is 200 mils. Okay, at 300 yards, my tree line is 100 mils. At 500 yards, my tree line is 60 mils. At 700 yards, it's 40 mils. At 90 yards, 900 yards, did I say that right? 100 yards, 20 mils. 300 yards, 100 mils. 500 yards, 60 mils. 700 yards, 40 mils. 900 yards, 30 mils. Okay, so at those distances, that's what I expect how I expect the trees to line up in my reticle. And I don't even have to do those calculations on the spot. These are numbers that I can just memorize, right? Because that's something I expect to see out here in the woods. And those are numbers I would have memorized. So depending on what your situation is, another thing that is pretty common is tractor trailers. Tractor trailers are 75 feet long, 13.5 feet tall. So again, this is the type of scope that you can use to range estimate off of things like tractor trailers that have very standard lengths and very standard heights. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this reticle. All right, so over here, right, so first of all, on the side over here, you can range estimate somebody based on their height, right? So all the way out here, that's how tall a man would be at 300 yards. Over here, let's say that would be at 600 yards. Over here at 800 yards. Now, you also have the line that goes across. So if all you're seeing is, let's say, from the waist up, which is very common, basically you would just size them from you would size them from the waist up on the top half. Okay, so they did that's a really excellent thing that they did, and I like how they put it on both sides, because now this kind of functions as an arrow that points you to the center. So that's also pretty ingenious the way they set that up. Okay. So the other thing that you can do is you can use these lines over here that would measure up. You would measure that against the person's shoulder. So average person is about 18 to 20 inches wide. So you would match that up. So for example, if that's how wide he is, he's at 600 yards. Okay. So you can use a person. So this reticle is very dedicated to being able to range estimate off of a person, but the reality is that most of the time when we're shooting, we're not shooting at people, right? In fact, in my case, 100% of the time. So I need to be able to range estimate off of other things, so this reticle allows me to do that. Now, the other thing I got here is I got my wind holes, right? So these dots over here, so on this line over here, that's the 400 line. You got 5, 10, 15, and 20 mile per hour wind holes all the way down to the to 800 yards, right? 5, 10, 15, 20. I was kind of like going back and forth between trying to decide if I wanted to get this scope with the Raptor, which is basically the Raptor focuses on your wind holes, right? That's what you see here, versus the Griffin. The Griffin is basically, it's a mill grid that just has basically your dots 1 mil apart. I wanted the mill grid because it's very useful for communicating, but one of the things that I realized that with on the 800 line, right, as I measured it, on the 800 line, the wind holes are 1 mil apart. Okay, so if I know that those wind holes are 1 mil apart, I can use that to communicate. So for example, if let's say we're looking at a rock, right, at let's say 700 yards, right, and we say 700 yards, and let's say I'm talking to a spotter or somebody else, maybe he doesn't have the same scope. Well, if the rock is someplace out here, right, I can look down at the 800 line and I can say 3 mils to the right of that rock is where I want you to look. So it's very convenient that the 800 line, that those wind holes are 1 mil apart, and that's the reason why I ended up getting the Raptor as opposed to the Griffin. Ideally, in the perfect world, I mean, I really wanted both of them. Like ideally, I would want like the Griffin with the wind holes in there. The problem that can be with the problem that you can have with that is you can have a little bit too much information in there. Unlike a scope that, let's say, magnifies up to like 25 power, as you zoom in, everything gets spread out. And if you try to have the wind holes and the mill grid on a scope that only goes to 8 power, I can see how for some people that might be a little bit too busy. Okay, so but because the 800 line, because I know that on the 800 yard line, those wind holes are 1 mil apart, I kind of have all the benefits that I would have if I had a mill grid here, because I can kind of like follow this up or down, and I can say from the center you're off, like let's say 3 mils to the right, and of course I've got the mills also here on the horizontal stadia. I can also reposition the whole scope if I need to, like to really like get out here at a distance. But it's nice that if you're holding on a target, let's say at 600 yards, and you want to tell somebody to basically look, let's say 3 mils to the right, I can kind of reference down to the 800 line and use that as a reference point. So that is a really big convenience for me. And of course, you can also use this as a bullet drop, as is pretty standard with the ACSS. You zero in at 100 on the tip. The legs are going to be at 200. The bottom, these legs over here. Then the top of the post is 300. That's your 400, 500, 600. So you got your built-in bullet drop compass here. So this is really an excellent scope. Gives me lots of information, and I can understand how for somebody that's like new to this, there might be too much information there, but the important thing here is that you're going to grow into it, okay? When I started doing this stuff, this kind of stuff, let's say, you know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I was just using a standard scope. I wasn't milling, I wasn't doing wind holds back then. But what happened is all those other scopes that I was using like 10 years ago, I sold them all off because I kind of outgrew them. So this is a scope that you can grow into, okay? So that's an important thing for you guys to think about. Don't just look at where you are now. Think of where you want to go. And the great thing about this is because this is a mill scope, right? The stuff that you learn here is going to you'll also be able to use down the road on different scopes, or if you go get training from somebody that, let's say, has a military background. If you're trained in how to use a mill grid or mill-based scope, you'll be able to learn off of that person without having that big of a learning curve. Other great thing about this is that the turrets are also in mills. So one of the things that you want to look for is you want you want the measurements that are in your reticle to match up with the increments on your turrets. And at first it might seem a little bit weird because it's like, okay, well, I'm used to adjusting based on inches at 100 yards. But the nice thing about this is it's a really easy switch over because you now have a measuring instrument here. So let's say I'm zeroing in at 100 yards. I can see the bullet holes on the paper at 100 yards. So if, let's say my bullet holes are, this is my bullseye, let's say my bullet holes end up over here. Well, I can measure in mils how far off my center I am, right? And then basically, one click is 1/10 or 0.01. So if you want to move 1 mil, basically it's 10 clicks, right? So you can use the scope, you can use this reticle to measure how many mils off of center you are, right? Both vertical and horizontal. And then once you measure the mils, then you can use the clicks in here which correspond and pretty much get on bullseye pretty quickly, okay? So let me give you guys a quick look again about what this looks in 1 power, because I'm going to now talk to you about some of the benefits of having a scope like this. Okay. All right. All right, everyone, so we're gonna do some moving and shooting now, okay? So I've had this scope for about 4 days. I've been shooting at close distance, long distance. First, we're gonna shoot this with the illumination off, okay? So just the etched reticle. Try and compare how quick I am with with just the etched reticle. So right there, I actually kind of lost the etched reticle because I saw a little bit of scope shadow. And that's where, if you have an illuminated reticle in the center, it really helps because if you see that reticle, what happens is your right eye sees the reticle, left eye sees the target, your brain combines the two images. I'm gonna put on the illuminated reticle now, so we have a combination of both the posts and the reticle in the center, and I think, basically pay attention to the speed at which I'm shooting. So it was way easier to shoot on the move when you have both the posts to guide you to the center and that illuminated reticle in the center, okay? So here's the thing, you cannot rely on that reticle to work for you when you want it to work for you, unless you have that auto off, auto on capability. Because with all my prior scopes, every time I go to pick it up, battery was always dead, so I would forget to turn it off. Okay, so that is kind of critical. Okay, the scope needs both. It needs the posts to drive you to the center, and it needs a reticle that will light up, and that you can depend that it will be lit up, that it will light up when you go to use the rifle, and not that the battery is dead. Okay. Now, one way that they could improve this is to also make the posts light up. Now, I understand that that's going to draw a lot of power. I think the only way that they could do that is either to put a solar panel on this to feed the posts, right, to light up the posts, or some type of fiber optic to feed the posts. You know, just an idea, I guess, for the next generation of this M8 Raptor. But with what I have right now, it's working good on the move, moving and shooting. Combination of the posts to drive me to the center, plus a reticle that I can just leave it on and have confidence that it's going to turn itself off and wake itself back up when I go to pick up the rifle. That is a major advantage. Okay, that's the reason why I paid the $1,500 for the scope. I needed that capability. Let me put this down, and I'm going to go through a list of details now with you guys. Hold on. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about some of the details of this scope. Okay, so initially, the first part of this video, I spoke to you guys about the things that really make it stand out, which is the reticles, the fact that you see something different in 1 power versus an 8 power, that is very usable at those 2 different distances, and the fact that it has the auto off, auto on, which makes the illuminated reticle useful, right? Because without the auto off, auto on, you're either going to have a dead battery, or you're just not going to, you're just not going to light it up because you don't want to waste your battery. Okay, so in this video, first let's talk about the things that you want in an LPVO. Okay, so first it's got to be 1x fast. Okay, the primary purpose of having something that goes all the way down to 1 power is so that you can use it as like a red dot. Okay, granted, it's not going to be as good as a red dot, but it should come really close. You want to be able to get on your target fast and shoot it. Okay, so it's got to be 1x fast. You want magnification, right? You want some type of a bullet drop when you're shooting at distance. Okay, you want to range estimate both people and things, right? Wind holes, because when you're shooting at distance, the wind is really going to affect your bullet a lot. Communication, right? You want to have some type of way of communicating with other people, you know, where the bullets are landing or where they should be looking, and you want to be able to use the reticle for communication. Okay, and then leading moving targets. Okay, that's the other thing we want to do. So a whole bunch of stuff here that we're going to talk about. First thing I'm going to say that stands out is, you know, as far as the 1x fast and magnification and the bullet drop, right? When you get up to this line over here, I can kind of get that. I can completely get that out of my red dot with the magnifier behind it, right? Because I've got the I got my Holosun 503 Gs that have the ACSS built into the reticle, right? That's a regular in the red dot, and then I can put the magnifier behind it. So here's the thing with the red dot with the magnifier. One of the greatest things about the magnifier is that you can not just flip it to the side, but completely remove it, okay, to lighten up the gun. So at night, I don't have to carry the magnifier on the gun. Magnifier easy on, easy off, you know, if you've got that quick release. Okay, so with the LPVO, we're married to 1.5 pounds on top of the gun. Okay, so since I'm going to be carrying 1.5 pounds, I want more than just 1x fast magnification bullet drop. Okay, so you know, otherwise, if that's all you're looking for, you know, stick with the red dot with the magnifier behind it. Okay, I want to be able to range estimate both people and things. Okay, that's important. And then I want all those other things that we talked about. So the most expensive part of this scope is not the $1,500 I paid for it. It's the fact that it's 1.5 pounds sitting on top of the gun. This is very expensive weight-wise. It weighs almost as much as a laptop, and for that £1.5, I want some serious computing power. Okay, so what does the M8 do for us? Well, in 1 power, we're basically getting a duplex reticle. Okay, a duplex reticle, which is similar to the German 4, a proven design for, you know, for being able to get on target fast. Okay, and then, you know, if you need to zoom in, you zoom into this. So you see something completely different in 1 power versus 8 power. And in addition to that, we got the duplex reticle. Okay, and then we got the illuminated horseshoe in the center, which functions as a red dot, which would be worthless, okay, if it didn't have the auto off, auto on, right? Because if you don't have the auto off, auto on, you can't rely on that illuminated horseshoe to be on when you want it to be on. So this M8 delivers in that respect. Okay. Now, as far as range estimating, we want to be able to range estimate not just people, but also things. Now, on the people side, I think, and I spoke about this earlier, we can range estimate people on their height. We can range estimate them from the waist up, right, through this, because this line over here, you would place that at the waist. And we can also range estimate them at the shoulder, right? You would match up this bar over here to the shoulder width, and you can range estimate people that way. But most of the time, we're not shooting at people, we're shooting at things, right, at targets. So your target might be, let's say, 20 inches tall or whatever, or it might be, let's say, a deer, you know, and most deer are of a standard height, standard length. So same deal, we can use the mills over here to range estimate things and animals. Okay, out here, in the I'm in the woods, I see lots of trees. Okay, so my tree line is about 90 feet tall. The trees themselves aren't that tall, right? But the ground is uneven, so my average tree line is about 90 feet tall. So I've already determined that at 100 yards, my tree line is going to be 200 mils. So my tree line is going to be from this post to that post, right? 200 mils top to bottom at 100 yards. Okay, at 300 yards, it's going to be 100 mils. So it'll be from the chevron to the top of the post over here. Okay. Now, mind you, when you're looking at the tree line at 100 yards, that's probably the place where it's going to be the most inconsistent, because now you're kind of looking at an individual tree as opposed to a whole tree line. So that's not something I would be too dependent on at 100 yards. But here's the thing: at 100 yards, you're just putting your dot on the target anyway, or you chevron on the target and you're shooting it. So at 300 yards, that really starts to become important, right? So at 300 yards, my trees are 100 mils. At 500 yards, my trees are 60 mils. At 700 yards, my trees are 40 mils. At 900 yards, my trees are 30 mils. Okay. So the other thing that you can use to range estimate is tractor trailers. Tractor trailers are 75 feet long, 13.5 feet tall. Okay, your traffic lights are about 18 to 20 feet off the ground. Right, so these are like standard things of kind of standard heights that you can kind of figure out in advance and create like a table, and then you don't actually need to do the calculations. You can do all of that in advance, and you can use your grid over here to quickly range estimate the things that you commonly see. Okay, wind holes. Okay, we've got wind holes of 5, 10, 15, 20 miles per hour. Really important. I've had other scopes that only show the 5s. This shows you 5, 10, 15, and 20. And the other thing is that the 20, on the 800 line, right? So you can see how 5, 10, 15, 20, but also on the 800 line, the dots also happen to be 1 mil apart. So that's also really useful for communication, right? Or for leading targets, because you can count the number of seconds that a target is traveling from one dot to the next. Let's say it takes 3 seconds. Well, you know that's you can lead it based on that. Okay? So these wind holes are really useful like that. Communication, right? You can use both the both the X, the Y axis, and also the 800 wind line to communicate with people, because all those are going to be 1 mil apart, and you can communicate with a spotter, because if you're holding on something, your spotter's, he's probably going to have just a standard mil grid, and he's going to say, okay, shift your point of aim 2 mils to the left. Okay, so you need a way to be able to do that. Okay, so on this, you've got both the X, the Y, and you also have the 800 line where your dots are 1 mil apart, to be able to communicate with your spotter, or to be able to just communicate with somebody else, or for example, let's say you're at 800 yards, right? Right, let's say you do, or let's not go too crazy. Let's say we're at 600 yards, right? So 600 yards, and it's a windy day, right? So let's say you're on the 10 line, right, on the 10 mile per hour dot. So you take your shot, and you see that it lands right next to it. Let's say right where your 15 is. So your next shot, you're gonna move your 15 over to the target and shoot it with that. Or let's say you see that it ends up here somewhere. Well, for the next one, you're gonna move up to that line over here. So you can use this to either make your own adjustments or to communicate with other people. Okay. And other thing, moving target leads. The way this is set up, if you have a human runner, basically you would lead him on the edge of the horseshoe. But sometimes if you've got time, right, I would actually time it. Like I would put my runner on the horizontal stadia line and just count how many seconds, go 1, 2, 3. How many seconds does it take him to go from 1 mil to the next? And I would lead him based on that. Okay, so that's another thing that you can do. You can use this to lead your moving targets. Okay, so a lot of stuff here. So initially, if you're just starting out, you may not need all this information. And when I started shooting, let's say, like, well, not even when I started shooting, like even 10 years ago, I wasn't using this type of information. In fact, even 5 years ago, I wasn't even using all this type of information. But you're going to grow into it, right? So this is a scope that you can grow into. And as you work with different people or different experiences, you can learn stuff from them. You can do different things. It just makes shooting a lot more interesting and fun, and you can kind of keep growing into it and learning new things. So that's one of the things I love about this scope. Is just so much stuff that you can do with it. And even if you're not doing it right now, later on you might be able to get into it. Like, for example, leading moving targets. I've only done that once. And that's something that's really interesting to me. That's something I would like to set up at some point so I can do it on a more regular basis. And that's something you gotta like set up something mechanical, or set it up on a let's say on a wagon on a sloped hill where you release it with a rope and it's rolling down, and you can try to lead the targets that way. So there's a lot. Once you've got something like this, you're gonna try to figure out ways to use it. Okay. Some other things that are really worth mentioning. First of all, let me say this. I like the bikini caps that they give you to cover up the scope. I hate the little plastic flip caps that break. Okay, those things are basically junk. They break. This is something that's actually going to stay in place. And the main reason I use this is just to keep the dust off the glass when I store this, right? With the flip-up caps, they usually just pop open anyway, so it doesn't keep the dust off the glass. This is going to stay in position. So I think that primary arm should kind of ship all the scopes with the bikini cover like this. Let's talk about the glass for a second. It's Japanese glass, which a lot of times people will speak very highly of it. I'm going to tell you guys, at 100 yards, I shot this. I was looking through the glass through this scope. I was looking through my primary arms ACSS, the first one, the $350 ones. I couldn't tell the difference. Okay, I'm not saying that there is not a difference. It's just that my eyes aren't good enough to see the difference. Okay, so that's one of the things that, I'm sure the glass is better. I'm sure it's more clear, but just don't be surprised if you can't tell the difference. Okay, so that's not one of the things that I'm really going to talk about much because I can't see the difference. I will talk about the mill adjustments though on turns. The turns are really cool because each one of these clicks is a point 1 mil. So basically 10 clicks gives you a 1 mil movement. Now, if you're used to, most people are used to making their adjustments in half-inch, half-inch adjustments, or 1/2 inch at 100 yards. It's really easy and quick to switch over to the system because you have a reticle that allows you to measure, because at 100 yards when you're zeroing in, you can see the bullet holes on the paper, okay? And that's what I mean. Like, my eyes are good enough to shoot like 1-inch groups at 100 yards, but not good enough to see the difference in the Japanese glass. But anyway, at 100 yards, if you're shooting, and let's say your bullet holes are 1 mil off to the right, right? Well, you can measure that in the scope, whether it's 1 mil or 2 mils. You can measure that in the scope, and if you gotta adjust 1 mil, well, that's 10 clicks, okay? Or if it's 2 mils, that's 20 clicks. So it's really easy to use the measurements in your reticle to make the corresponding adjustment on your scope. And that's one of the things that you want to scope. You want whatever measurements you have in your reticle, you want the scope to have the same increments on the dials that you're turning. Okay. The other thing I'm going to say about these turrets is that when you turn them, first of all, they're big, round, fat turrets. Okay, you can put your big paws on these and really turn them, and you can feel them. You're gonna feel the click. You're gonna hear the click. One of the issues that I had on my earlier primary arm scopes is I really couldn't feel the click sometimes, especially if I had my earmuffs on, or if it was raining, or if there was other people shooting around me. I couldn't quite feel or hear the clicks. With this, you're gonna feel and hear the clicks. Okay, so that's a big advantage of these turns, and they're big. They're not tiny. They're not small. They're big. Where you grab it and you go click, 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 click. One of the questions I had for Primary Arms customer service, is this scope waterproof when the caps are removed? Okay, because right about this time of year, it's September. It seems like it's raining every day almost. So like one of the days I was shooting this, it was raining and I was adjusting. So I found out that the scope is waterproof with the caps removed. Okay, so that's an important point to be aware of, that you can spin the dials in the rain. Let's talk about the mount. I've got here I think this is the $60 Primary Arms mount. Now, first of all, I did get the one that's extended. I don't even think, and the reason why I got the extended one is because I expected that this would be longer than my previous primary arm scopes. It's actually short. It's even shorter than my original one, the 1-8 ACSS, like the first SLX that they put out. This is even shorter than and lighter than that. Well, not lighter. It's about the same weight. It's 1.5 pounds. It is lighter than like my SLX Griffin. It's and shorter. So this is a compact. In fact, they have the word compact somewhere in the name. This is a compact scope, so you don't need the extended. You don't need the extended mount. You can just get the regular one. It's going to work fine. So just be aware of that. So I have here the $60 ones. They've got another one that's supposed to be a little bit lighter. That from Primary Arms, it costs like $250. I think it's like 2 ounces lighter. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll just stick with this one. It's good enough for me for now. Okay. Let's talk about the lever. They give you a nice lever. Okay. It is big enough that you can actually grab this and flip it over. Let me show you guys the lever. It's big enough that you can actually grab that. The standard one that, let's say I had like on my SLX, my other SLXs from Primary Arms, it was a little bit too low. So you had to use the throw lever, right, which was like an extra $30. And what happened, a lot of times I found that throw lever was a little too long. This one's about the right height, where it's if you're in one power like this, right, because this thing is pointed towards your body, it's not making contact with your body, right? As it sits right here, even though I got a nice sized stomach, that's not making contact with my body. Now they also offer a folding version that's longer but folds down. You have to buy that separate. I think that for the $1,500, they should have also included that. Like, they should have gave you both in case you want to try that one out, or at least give people the option of calling in and requesting it. I think that's just something that they just should have thrown in there, because some people are gonna, because with this one over here, I think it's the right length so that it doesn't touch your body, but I can see how a longer one would give you a little bit more leverage. So I would have liked to have that other one that folds down to try it out and see if I like that one better. Because I don't know if I would like that better or not. You know, if I try it out, I may not like it for some other reason that I haven't thought of yet. So, but I think they should have included that. But that's one of my, I think that's like the only complaint I've made so far with this. Leather size, as I said, this is compact. This is, in fact, when I pulled this out of the box, I thought it looked like, now, and I mounted it on the rifle, it looks almost a little bit stubby compared to some of my other 1-8. So they did a really good job of making this short as possible and also light. It's still, with the mount, it's still 1.5 pounds. You know, some of the other LPVOs I've seen, they get closer to 2 pounds. So they did a really good job with the size of keeping this compact. Okay, brightness, I've in 10 power. The sun's setting right now, but there's plenty of times where I kind of, basically, I pointed this towards the sun through the trees. Like, obviously, I'm not pointing it directly at the sun, but through the trees. When I got sunlight coming through the trees, I can still see the illuminated reticle in the direction of the sun. So the brightness is pretty decent. Okay, I think it's brighter than, it seems, I think it's brighter than my first SLX, the $350 one. So I think it's a little bit brighter than that. But again, that reticle would be absolutely useless without the auto on, auto off. So they did really good with that. Exposed cap. First of all, Sunshield. Let's talk about the Sunshield. They do give you, where are you? Let's open you up. How do you open? There it is. So they do give you a Sunshield that screws on to the front here. Is this it? This it? No, this it. There it is. Okay, good. So now they give you a Sunshield. Now, I don't know if the Sunshield is to kind of keep the sun from coming in, or if it is so that it doesn't like reflect light so somebody else can see it. So I'm not exactly sure how to use it yet, but it's there. And the interesting thing is when you add this on, it actually makes this the length that I kind of expected this to be. So it's really cool that when you remove this, it gets that much shorter. Okay, so they give you the Sunshield. The other thing that they give you, which is very cool, is an exposed cap. So where are you? So this is the cap that it comes with, and then what you do with this is you cover it up, which is really good because this way you can't hit it, bump it, move it, any of that stuff. But they give you an extra cap where you can remove this and completely replace it. And now you have an exposed turret. Okay, so you can leave this on there. This is not capped. I'm gonna keep this the way it is for now, and the reason is because a lot of times I'm moving through trees and stuff, so I want to keep my turrets covered up. But it's nice that they include this. The one thing I'm going to say, I mean, since we are talking about a $1,500 scope, because they only give you the a top one, they should have gave you one for the side as well. Because if you're the kind of guy that likes exposed turrets, you're gonna want to put this on the top. Chances are you're also going to want to put this on the side as well. Now I understand that most people that dial turrets, they usually only dial elevation, and then they'll use the reticle for their wind holds. But you may have somebody out there that also likes to dial for wind. So I think that they should have given you the 2 of these exposed caps, or at least give you the option of calling in and requesting one, right? If you want another one, you know, for the side over here. So I think that would be a good thing on a $1,500 scope. Okay, they do give you extra Allen screws, because you gotta There's 3 Allen screws that you have to remove. They give you an Allen key. In case you lose those Allen screws, they do give you 3 extra Allen screws. If you're doing that, you don't have to remove the screws all the way. Just loosen them up a little bit, and then the turret should spin really easily. So that way you can avoid losing your Allen screws. Okay. And that's another thing. Another great thing about this turret, you can you can set this once you zero it in. You can set it to 0. We're going to talk about that in the next segment a little bit more. Right now, I'm going to bring this back to 0. Now, if you see me, I'm spinning this thing back and forth. I'm like, oh my God, you're losing your 0. No, I'm not, because now this is marked. I know exactly where I'm moving. I know exactly. So I've set that to 0. I know exactly how to get back to my 0. Okay, so that's really good like that. Expose and then extra screws. Okay, so those are some of the details about this scope. Let me pause the camera, take a quick sip of water, and I'm going to tell you about some other really cool things about this scope and how I use it.